Well, as many of you know, after the election in 2024, the disappointing results, a lot of hand-wringing was done, a lot of after-action reports, a lot of armchair politicking to try to get to the bottom of what took place and how we can move forward in this political climate as winners as a Democratic Party. A lot has been said about the divide between your moderate Democrats. I am one who takes them to task on a regular basis. I'm sure you are out there too. But there's more of a divide in the contentious relationship between the left in politics and progressives. I consider myself a progressive, leaning to the left side of things, but I have a lot of friends who are, I think, wildly out of touch, who consider themselves leftist, hard L leftists. And joining me today is someone who wrote a fantastic article in April 23rd, that really caught fire. If you want to watch an interview about that specific article, I would recommend that you go check out Brittany Page's channel. The title of that one, From Liberal Currents, is Trump Alarmists Were Right, We Should Say So. Commentators who got it wrong, wouldn't listen, won't learn, and can't lead. Toby Buckle, I have you today. You wrote a piece in the New Republic that I want to talk to you about. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
It's nice to talk to people who know their shit. Some experts in the matter. This article from the New Republic you wrote, titled Why the Democratic Tea Party Failed and How It Could Succeed. For the left to win, it must blame fascism on the actual fascists. Now, your background, you host a political podcast called the Political Philosophy Podcast. This is something you traffic in. This is something you think a lot about. You studied at, I believe, Oxford, and then you got your degree at the University of York. Am I getting all of this,
Yep.
this Wikipedia type information correct?
Yep, that's all right.
And where would you consider yourself on a spectrum relative to liberalism, or in the United States Democratic Party kind of politics?
Yeah, I think similar to you, maybe progressive liberalism, certainly sympathetic to many of the policies of the left, but also, I think, as you said, concerned that some people are not hugely in touch with the political world in which they find themselves, and while their values are decent, can sometimes pursue unhelpful rhetorics or framings or narratives. And that's kind of what this piece is about. I'm not challenging the left on universal healthcare. I'm challenging them on how they tell stories, essentially.
Yeah, I'm often chagrined, if you can use that form of chagrin, about leftists who have no end game in mind. They want to complain and they want to armchair quarterback. They want to point fingers. But when actual power is in the possibility of within grasp, they piss it away through complaining and creating like a both sides, an equal playing field between the actual fascists and, you know, more mainstream Democrats like Kamala Harris, for instance. Do you find that to be kind of the playing field that we're facing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a question you can ask with any viewpoint, which is, okay, and where do you go with that? You know, and I think the left has, you know, over the whole Trump era, has increasingly not had an answer to this. Like in 2016, there were theories about like, oh, maybe Trump will prompt the revolution, so-called accelerationism. There was theories about we're going to excite people with Bernie Sanders' policy offer and win in primaries and take over from the inside. And none of those have really panned out, or panned out very partially. And so I think the question now must be, okay, well, what do we do now then? We, assuming sort of we progressives, broadly inclusive of both liberals and the left, where do we go now? And I do think for a section of the left, I don't think it's all, I hope it's a fairly small but quite online subsection, the answer to that question seems to be F off and stop asking me it. But that's just not a compelling or useful answer.
let's define terms. When in as this conversation progresses, I want everybody to let's define our term. When we're talking about the left, you mean like democratic socialist, avid readers of Jacobin, those types? Is that what you mean by left? And then progressive, it's like you and me, and really the more left side of the Democratic Party. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's fair. I use a term anti-establishment left because I think a lot of the time what we're arguing about isn't even really policy anymore. We're all sort of on the same page in that we want to tax billionaires and people to have healthcare, right? A lot of the time what divides us is attitudes towards Trump. Do we see him as an action or a reaction? And this is sort of how I define the anti-establishment left, is they very much have a narrative that Trump is a reaction, that America became too unequal, too oligarchic, the political system became corrupt and distant from people, and Trump emerged as a backlash to that. That's kind of the Bernie narrative as I see it. That's the DSA narrative as I see it. And I think increasingly more than like exactly what type of Medicare program do you want, that's kind of where the dividing line is now. It's about narratives more than policy. That's sort of how I draw it. But, that's one way. There'd be other ways.
So who exactly, this is, I should have led with this question. It was really the burning question as I read this article. Who did you intend the audience for this New Republic piece to be?
People in that quadrant, in that faction. Like, I got, people liked it and agreed with it who were sort of like Biden primary voters, I guess, because it gives a lot of airtime to their views. But I'm giving airtime to their views because I'm talking to people in the anti-establishment left, people who voted Bernie both times, maybe people who abstained in general elections because they didn't think the Democrats were progressive enough. I'm talking to them and saying, you've lost now multiple times to try and take the party over from the inside. I think it's fair enough to ask why. And at its simplest, you lost because you couldn't sell primary voters. Bernie lost 9 million to 19 million votes in 2020. He lost ground relative to 2016. It wasn't, despite a few good states at the beginning, it wasn't especially close. And so what I did is I just interviewed dozens, actually, of Biden voters and said, why? Why not Bernie? And sort of put a bit of a framework to it and then just wrote up what they told me, right?
Yeah.
And then...
I mean, full disclosure, I voted for Bernie in the primary in 2020 after making a calculation that Elizabeth Warren wasn't positioned well enough. So I was a Bernie voter. I love Bernie Sanders. I think he's great for America. I think he's great for American politics. It's the pesky purists among his followers that I think are the problem.
Although I do think there were unforced errors in that campaign. I think there's a lot.
Every campaign, though, right?
Sure, but this is what my article is. I'm saying these are the unforced errors. But yeah, no. But to answer your question, who am I talking to? I'm talking to the left. I'm saying, look, we don't agree about everything, but we actually agree more than we disagree. And sometimes when you're in a bit of a dead end, you need someone from the outside to say, here's why you went wrong. Because I think the left often doesn't see the world very well from the eyes of a more moderate Democrat. They don't really understand what makes them tick or how they think. And I think sometimes you need someone a bit like me who is a bit more sympathetic to that point of view to say, look, you might not even mean to be, but here's how you're coming across.
Yeah, I think this is often the case when I talk to people who are academics and smart, big brain pan people like you, and also people who traffic, I keep using that word, who really who settle in philosophy. That I think you are offering too much fairness and charity to the anti-establishment left, because I don't believe their intent is good. I don't think that they want power. I think they want to criticize power. I think they want to be critiquers of the system. And this is evidenced by them turning on AOC. I have friends that have put in their stories on Instagram and shit recently that the Democratic Party is right of Donald Trump and the Republican Party on Israel, and that is just fucking nonsense, man. You know what I mean?
That's all downstream of not wanting to vote for them. You start from a point of view that it's the Democrats' fault, and then you work backwards to actually AOC's to Donald Trump's right. And yeah, it's a nonsense position, but it's not really what's driving them. They're starting from a point of view of antipathy towards mainline liberalism.
Maybe so. I mean, you're a smarter guy than me, so I'll give you some fairness and charity.
But listen, this is one of the things I really struggle with, is like, you're saying I'm too charitable on them. They themselves do not feel this way, that I was being too charitable on them. So, like how you calibrate that as just like a matter of rhetoric, Anyway.
Yeah, no, I gotcha. Well, you cover 6 points, and I want to kind of briefly get your take on each one of these 6 points in the bullets at the end here. And here's how left progressive alliance could learn from their failures to win a Democratic Tea Party today. I think a lot of, if I were to give you any criticism, and you understand the landscape in American politics as well as just about anybody, using the term Tea Party relative to our past, and I don't mean our far away past of the Boston Tea Party in the Revolution. I mean the racist movement that grew as a reaction to President Obama, our first black president. I think people bristle at that. But having said that, your number one point is all messaging should afford the right agency. Blame and anger for fascism should be focused on the fascists. Now, is this a criticism of the left, the reactionary left, who are constantly tending to act like Democrats are also fascists? For instance, I have my criticisms of your corporate Democrats, your Ruben Gallegos from Arizona now in the Senate, your Alyssa Slotkins in the Senate, people who have turned their backs on their previously held positions about supporting trans people, about supporting trans children, about protecting the most vulnerable and marginalized communities in our country. I have a lot of criticism for them. I think they're cowards in many ways, but they're not fascists. They're just weak. Is that what you mean by that first point?
They're weak.
Without all the invectives?
Yeah, they're weak. They're failing. They are a problem in all sorts of ways. They are not the cause of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the cause of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Right?
It goes back to your first point, or your earlier point.
They are failing to oppose Donald Trump. They did not create him. Now, what I'm not saying is never criticize the Democrats. I'm saying think strategically about how you do that. And I think, people did bristle at the Tea Party label. To be clear, I'm not saying these movements have the same values at all. Even at their very worst, the anti-establishment left are much better morally than the Tea Party. But there is a sort of structural analogue. These are activist rebels trying to replace the leadership of their party. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, how did the activist rebels in the Tea Party do that? When they attacked other Republicans, they had a phrase they always used, rhino, Republican in name only. In other words, what they're not saying is Republicans suck and we hate Republicans. They're saying you're not a real Republican. We're more Republican than you. We embody the ideals and values of our movement much better than you do, and it's not the sun, and it's you're letting the side down. And that's how I think left challengers need to learn to talk. Instead of saying, as Bernie does, we're running against both parties. Core Democratic primary voters hate that rhetoric. Say, some Democratic senators are just not performing. They're letting the side down. If it's not about the team as such. It's this particular player on the team isn't doing their job and we need a better one.
That's great. I really like that. to not, and it's also not speaking, it's not the Reagan's 11th commandment about never speaking ill of other Republicans. It's not like that where you can't criticize the party, because I criticize the party and its members all the time. And I'm a Democrat. I'm a registered Democrat. I think that's powerful, though, that if you want to increase the size of the tent without compromising your values and your policy prescriptions, that you want to broaden the people who are going to be coming in. So, well, your number two, if you need to criticize, we led right into it. If you need to criticize Democratic politicians, run as being more pro-Democrat than they are, not less. The problem is, I underline this, the problem isn't the party, it's that they let down the party. Let me give you an example of where I want to maybe poke holes in this or get your clarification on it. I've been criticizing there. I mean, there's a host of different reasons. There's a satellite of a constellation of reasons that the Democrats lost this election to Trump. I think chief among them, not the only reason, but chief among them, is trying to be Republican light, giving too much prime time speaking time to literal Republicans at the Democratic National Convention, sharing the stage with Dick Cheney's fucking daughter, Liz Cheney, and acting as though we're the same because we opposed Donald Trump, when Liz Cheney voted in lockstep with Donald Trump during her time in Congress. This, I think, is a criticism of the party. And when the leader of the party, the person running to be president of the United States under the banner of Democrats, when they appear or want to appear as Republican light, I think it is a criticism of the party, no?
Could you not just equally put that same critique into a sort of rhino, or in this case, Dino framing? The president can be a rhino or a Dino. Could you not say? And I'm honestly unsure how much the Cheney stuff hurt them electorally. My gut is it might not have made that big a difference, but be that as it may, say you're correct. Could you not say Kamala Harris is letting the party down? We should be Democrats. We should be proud Democrats. We should be proud of who we are. We don't need to get a Republican on stage to endorse us. Our own vision and values are enough. Could you not say it?
So it's just a rhetorical adjustment, you mean?
Sure, yeah. But yeah, there's no just. Rhetoric is important. It's what people vote on.
No, I don't mean to dismiss it. I mean that you're not really changing any positions. It's just you're adjusting the language.
Exactly.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said just.
Yeah.
Your number three, I put a question mark next to it, and it's for this reason. You say, avoid both sides rhetoric. Republicans are much more to blame for the failures of American governance. Now that I know who the audience, that this is for the anti-establishment left, the types who are the Jacobin readers, the types who think that Kamala Harris is a fascist, that's for them. Because I often am criticized because people who do my job, people who do your job, who talk about politics for a living, I end up getting lumped in with leftists who do criticize the Democratic Party. Except when I do it, and maybe this is just me offering myself fairness and charity, I'm doing it to try to better the party. I don't see them as trying to better the party. So maybe this is just, it's a personal aggrievement of mine, because I get called the resistor, the lib resistor, a Trump resistor, and I get dismissed, even though my politics are far more aligned to, big L leftists than they are Alyssa Slotkin, for instance. That was just a filibuster. There's no real question there. I am interested in your number 4 point, though. Core liberal voters loathe and fear fascism. Stop insisting they don't. I think everybody in my audience can agree they're here because they fear fascism and what could result from it. And there's too much talk on the left of not correctly identifying fascism. Do you think that's correct? Listen, this whole interview is going to be me asking you to ruffle my feathers or puff me up and make me feel like I'm very smart and right about things, Toby.
I mean, but Yes, right? Like, there's a type of person out there, and I hope they're a small online minority. I don't think this represents a huge group of people, right? But who thinks like Elizabeth Warren voters are fascists. And it's like,
Yeah.
again, where do you go with that? Where's that belief taking you? Maybe you're right. What follows, you know?
Yeah. So would you, on a spectrum here, the political purity tests that are put in place by the anti-establishment left, do you see that as a critical error in the way that they move through the world and view politics in America?
So purity is a really interesting word. I'm just going to zero in on that because it is something a bit like ritual purity in a religious system, right? We're very used to, I think, people in our political tribe making morally consequentialist arguments. Trump does more harm, therefore not vote Trump, right? It's an argument about consequences. They're not really seeing consequences. They're seeing contamination, right? They talk about feeling dirty having to vote for Biden. And in a sense, actually, that's a misunderstanding of what purity is in religious systems, in systems, Judaism and Islam, that have purity. Purity isn't about always avoiding contamination. It's about purifying yourself after that to re-enter sacred space. I mean, in practical terms, purity isn't you never get your hands dirty. It's you wash your hands before you eat. And so I think it is purity. I think it's to some extent a misunderstanding of purity. I think in this, what I'm driving at with that particular point is also a misunderstanding of where your mainline Biden voting Dem is at. Like, I think they just don't understand us very well. I think they think we're all about deference to the party and defending the Democrats no matter what.
Yeah.
Actually, what we're about is opposing Trump no matter what. Now, what follows from that is, yeah, you have to vote Democrat, right? Like, but not because we love the Democrats. We sometimes do and we sometimes don't. You have to vote Democrat because you have to be an anti-fascist. That's the non-negotiable for us.
Yeah.
And I think they just misidentify where we're at psychologically a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'm another reason you just reminded me of something that another reason I'm suspect of their motives is because of when you said anti-fascist. Remember in 2016, in 2017, in 2018, Antifa was a boogeyman that the right created, that these masked chaos agents are out there in the streets trying to tear down America. And where's Antifa now? I mean, it's the same type of criticism I have for where are the anti-Israel, the anti-genocide protesters that were doing good work largely in the streets of America to bring attention to what is a horrible thing taking place in Gaza right now. Where the fuck are they now? You know, they could be out there protesting Donald Trump and the agenda of this administration, giving cover, giving passes to Israel in its continued onslaught and delivery of death to the people of Palestine. And they're nowhere to be fucking seen, man. So this is why I think I've abandoned the fairness and charity approach, is because I think their motives are more suspect and they're more attention seekers than they are power seekers. What do you think?
I think so. Let's take the hard case of Gaza, right? I think you could probably broadly divide that into two groups. I think there's the sort of mainline unaffiliated movement, which I think by and large found the right path in a very difficult situation. They protested by voting unaffiliated in the Democratic primary, and fine, right? Like, that doesn't help Trump directly, at least.
Right.
And then a lot of the leaders got to this position where they said, we'll vote for Harris and we'll encourage people to do it, but we won't endorse her, which might seem like a distinction without a difference, but I kind of feel where they're coming from. They're saying, we're reluctantly doing this. And cool. I say people have to vote Democrat. I don't say they have to love doing it, right? So I really have no shock. And in fact, agree with a lot of, and I've been very critical of Israel and talked about this, that sort of more mainline movement. I think there is another section of, let's say, the hardcore online anti-establishment left, who were already working themselves towards a position of abstention throughout really the entire Biden presidency, for whom the Gaza situation crystallized that and gave them a very powerful rhetoric to express it with. But I think they were always heading that way.
So it was justifying the action they were going to take anyway, and they just happened to, this is going to seem flippant of a genocide, but they happened to get lucky enough that this global tragedy was taking place, and they capitalized on it. Am I distilling, or am I misconstruing what you're saying?
I think what happens a lot of the time in politics is people are coming to a position for a range of reasons, some of them rational, some of them emotional, some of them conscious, some of them subconscious, that they might not fully understand themselves. And they'll sometimes find something to latch onto and go, it's this, right? This is why. And this is not unique to the left. This happens all the time. But so what's going on with left abstention? There's a number of things, right? There's this purity concern that this is morally contaminating in a way. There's sort of a gender concern. The Democratic Party is seen as female coded, and that makes a lot of young men uncomfortable. There's concerns about the expressivist side of politics. Politics isn't just about outcomes. Politics is about who we are, how we see ourselves, how other people want to see us, in the same way as our musical tastes. You know, do you like opera or heavy metal? We're signaling something about ourselves to the world there, right? And a lot of people feel uncomfortable signaling to the world that I am a loyal Democrat, that Kamala Harris speaks for who I am. That's something that vibes with people the wrong way, right? It
vibes with me the wrong way. I don't like it.
Sure. Now, I think what you and me would say is the expressivist side is less important than the consequence side, right? At the end of the day, it's the consequences that matter. But
I agree with that.
But a lot of people don't feel that way. For a lot of people, the expressivist side or the purity side or gender side, they become primary, or at the very least, they struggle to reconcile those two things. But that's a broad set of feelings and emotions that people struggle to sort of put a reason to, right? And so then, and this is where you get these terrible arguments, like actually AOC's to the left of, but that's not what's primary. What's primary are these sorts of things that I've described, these identitarian emotional things, and then they put a reason to it, and they say actually it's that they're all the same, or that AOC's to the right. And then when Gaza happens, that becomes a very clear, very forceful rhetoric to express that way. So I'm not saying it's wholly disingenuous. I think they look at the same images we do and they are rightfully appalled by them. But it also serves a function. And that function is to say this. All of these vague, harder to describe, more subconscious reasons why I feel discomfort with the Democratic Party, this kind of puts a pin in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, for sure. So we'll just keep going down the list here. Recognize, apologize for, and work to redress the misogyny and racism that have festered unaddressed in the anti-establishment left. I didn't have these memorized, and I was going to ask a follow-up before I got to the next point. I'm glad I didn't, because then it would have been like, what the fuck, man? You're not reading the article. I want you to speak to that a little bit, because there's a whole cottage industry of talking about the loneliness epidemic with young men, and it's not a loneliness epidemic. It's a misogyny epidemic, and they don't know how to fucking treat women. And then they're lonely because the women don't want anything to do with them. How do you see it?
Statistically, by far and away, the worst thing you can do for your dating life as a young man is be a conservative. It's the number one deal breaker for women, for young women who are overwhelmingly liberal now. And it's not even conservatism generally, it's specifically social issues. Do not want to date people who hold these beliefs, and reasonably and rationally so. Right? Yeah, no, exactly right. The manner.
Wait. Say that one more time with a little bit more oomph. What? Exactly right. I'm doing a bit here. Sorry. Go ahead.
But yeah, no, exactly right. this sort of like articles bemoaning young men, the manosphere, the right wing. Now, these are not responding to a crisis of loneliness in young men. These are creating a crisis of loneliness in young men.
I do agree with that point. Do you think that we have ceded ground culturally to allow this false narrative about loneliness epidemic to fester and to grow by, like, how should we be addressing dum-dums and dipshits like Jordan Peterson, for instance, and who are like the tip of the spear for the manosphere movement? I mean, how should we be dealing with this as a political movement, as a culture in 2025 in the era of Donald Trump?
Here's my 1 minute, and this is a bit beyond what I meant by that point number 5, but here's my 1 minute pitch for how to respond to that. 1, don't validate the premises. Don't assume their basic framework to argue in. Here's what I would say to a sort of young man who's flirting with that. These people are lying to you. They are lying to you about how the world works and about how men and women work because they want you to be aggrieved in this way, because that makes you exploitable to them, so they can bank money or votes from you. But those lies will ruin your life if you let them.
Yeah.
Perhaps in a more philosophical mood, I might go on to say, these people, not only are they lying, but they have a worldview that there is a set thing to be a man, there is a set way to be a man, you have to be it that way, and the world somehow is conspiring to stop you. It is not. Men today have more freedom to be whatever type of man we want to be than they have at any point in the past. Anybody within reason can become a police officer or a firefighter or join the army or have a vocation that is traditionally masculine. But equally, any man can be a nurse or a teacher or a caregiver or a stay-at-home parent, or things that we would have been denied in the past. And I think having that freedom and that choice is good for men. I like being able to choose the type of man that I am. And yes, it's not handed to you. You're not given a guide of this is what exactly you do. But that's good, and that's ultimately for our benefit. And people who want to return us to these narrow little boxes should be told to F off. This is sort of how I would respond to this.
Now you're speaking my language, Toby. Now you're speaking my language. Well, let's number 6. The article almost completely wraps with this, and I fully endorse this. I don't know that you needed endorsement from some dipshit on YouTube, but you got it here, brother. Everyone who abstained in a presidential election or even sympathized with or made excuses for those who did should publicly apologize. And then I think more importantly, those who refuse to do so should no longer be welcome in the movement. If you did, I will just restate this brilliant point in less intelligent words. If you gave Donald Trump space, if you tried to both sides this, if you created moral equivalency between Kamala Harris, a good and decent woman, a flawed person because she's a human being, if you did that between her and Donald Trump, the existential crisis and clear and present danger that he is, your opinion does not matter, because the writing on the chalkboard is very clear. And the reason we're in this situation is too many people, it's not the sole reason, too many people thought like this. And I agree with you 100%. You're exactly right, Toby. They should be jettisoned from the political movement.
Here's my point. Because doesn't the fact that you had such a positive reaction to that as a core Democratic-based primary voter kind of tell the left something, right? It tells them that's what they need. That's what people like you need to hear in order to trust them again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's who I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean,
because I know people like us who have been in the trenches on this issue and arguing, look, I'm a progressive too, but you have to vote, and getting yelled at for that view, because people get really riled on both sides of this issue, right? People like us just hold up our hands and say, amen, brother, right? Of course, that is exactly what I want to hear. But here's the question I would put to the left, who maybe have a more sympathetic view of abstention. How do you want the Democratic core-based primary voters to be hearing you and reacting to you? Do you want them to be feeling uncomfortable with you? Do you want them to be feeling like you're not really on the same team as them? Or do you want to say something and have the reaction you just have of saying, yes, hallelujah? You want them to say, yes, hallelujah, right? Surely. Yeah. It's not just about being right, although we effing are. It's about, like, what will work for you. And the fact that the left is associated with abstention, fairly or not, and I think it's at least partially fairly, is why they can't, is one of the big reasons they can't win primaries. And that is... I wonder,
sorry, Toby, I wonder sometimes, this point here, I wonder if oftentimes their motivation is actually teaching a lesson. For instance, we'll bring up Alyssa Slotkin again, someone I'm no fan of. If Alyssa Slotkin ran for president of the United States, or God forbid, Gavin fucking Newsom, guy who loves to court Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon and not correct them when they're liars and bigots.
Calling it, what's that? He won't crack 10% in any primary state.
Yeah, right. But so in my fantasy land here, my little example, if it's between Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom, who I loathe, I'm voting for Gavin Newsom. So I wonder, or Alyssa Slotkin, same thing, or Ruben Gallego, or any number, Mark Warner, any number of these Democrats who can't stop tripping over themselves to try to advance Donald Trump's agenda through some excuse about good order and making the government work and being good, whatever, all the nonsense. But I often think that leftists, they want to teach a lesson to an Alyssa Slotkin or a Gavin Newsom, even if it means bringing upon the destruction of the republic, because for them, the purity of it and the absolutism of it is what is more important than the actual outcome or the consequence of their action.
Yeah.
No?
Yes. And I think, if you were to give it its most dignified form, there's a vague theory of change there, which is that, we have certain requirements that we need the Democratic Party to meet. Otherwise, we're going to abstain. And the idea will be that would pull the Democratic Party towards our position. I guess, the very blunt answer to that is, well, it didn't work, did it? There was significant abstention in 2016 about... This is another thing the left does, is they always get this wrong and say only 10% of Bernie primary voters in 2016 abstained. It's not. It's more like 25, 30%. So it's about 4 million people, which is potentially outcome determinative.
Well, depending on which state, had it been Florida, it would have made all the difference. Had it been... Even in 2016, I'm talking about.
Yeah. But even in the Rust Belt, like the Jill Stein vote was often higher than the margin between the candidates.
Now,
so we abstained in 2016. And then the thought was, okay, well, now the Democratic Party will have to meet us where it's at. And the Democratic responded by nominating Joe Biden, right? Now, Biden's presidency was reasonably progressive on a number of fronts, but that's the
I agree.
That's the extent of the success of that strategy is Joe Biden, right?
Mm-hmm.
It did not endear Democratic primary voters to the left. Indeed, I think one of the reasons Bernie didn't win in 2020 is people had a bitter taste in their mouth from 2016. I think there were a lot of people who would have voted for Warren, but wouldn't vote for Bernie. In fact, I've talked to a lot of them in this article. Warren was their number one choice, but when it became a straight binary between Biden and Bernie, they went Biden, right? And I think part of that is the legacy of 2016. And so, anyway, to put it very simply, I think the left there's two strategies here. One, we try and pull the Democratic Party to the left through abstention, or two, we try and pull it to the left by winning primaries and taking it over from the inside. One of those strategies works and one of them doesn't. And here's the thing, you can't do both.
What has been the reaction from anti-establishment leftist types, whether it be, I wouldn't say on social media because that's not real life, but have you had contact with people who gave you some fairness and charity and listened to your arguments and had feedback for you after reading it?
Yeah. The reaction's been mixed from that section. I'd say there's three groups broadly. One is, I think there's a lot in that section who get it. And particularly this point about, like, we can't be seen as not on the team anymore. It's just killing us. Like, they get it. Like, like, it helps to have me tell them, but they're already there, right? There's another section that'll sort of split the difference and say, I can see points 1 through 4, but not 5 and 6. And I think particularly me using the word apologise riled people. And I was being provocative there, to be fair.
Yeah.
But I also think sometimes you have to put it directly, and then
I think it's factual. To apologize indicates that there was some moral failing. I think oftentimes you did something, and they did something wrong and immoral.
Yeah, and we want people to learn from it. It's not about being punitive. It's about doing better in the future, right?
Acknowledging that you understand the lay of the land now, and that you're not going to make the same mistake again, right?
Yeah, and that's just in, never mind politics, in like day-to-day life, that's a prerequisite for people trusting you again if you've made a mistake, right?
Yeah, in Christianity, I'm not a religious guy. I grew up, I don't know if you know about me, I grew up in a Christian nationalist, far-right household in northern Idaho, where rhino, before it was cool, was a word that was used to talk about Republicans. Okay. So I speak that language very well. And I just walked myself right out of the point I was trying to make. Oh, the religious element of it. I think this plays a very chief role in all of this, is that it just kind of gets intertwined with all of it. Anyway, listen, thanks for joining me. Where can people find you? You are a great follow on Blue Sky. It's been on the screen the whole time. I would suggest and recommend to everybody that they go follow you on Blue Sky, because one, you miss out on the posh, very intelligent sounding British accent, but there's some good stuff. You really talk about a lot of good stuff. And your podcast, where can people fiend that?
You're being far, far, far too kind. You're making me blush. Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky. That's my main platform now. I'm off Twitter. And yeah, my podcast is pretty unimaginatively called the Political Philosophy Podcast, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's talking about the ideas of politics as much as the policies, not just Medicare for all or whatever, but what do things like equality and justice mean as ideas is sort of my wheelhouse. And like the stories we tell about the Democratic Party or Trump, that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time. So yeah, Political Philosophy Podcast, just look that up on my name.
And you do a lot of writing. Where can people read your eloquent words, sir?
So this article is in the New Republic. I think we gave a fair overview of it here, but it really goes into detail, and I interview a lot of people and sort of quote at length from Democratic primary voters. I mostly write for Liberal Currents, which I would really recommend to everyone. It's sort of one of the better, almost just like blogs these days, that features a lot of smart people who are, if you're sort of feeling, I'll put it this way, like, you don't want to be either part of the Slotkin team that just endlessly moderates, or the team who are kind of Bernie dead-enders who think just yelling at people online about AOC being a fascist is the answer. If you're thinking there's got to be somewhere between those two, I would definitely pitch you on Liberal Currents, which is our philosophy is we take liberalism seriously. We talk about freedom and pluralism, and we mean it. Right. Yeah. So I would definitely recommend that, not just for me, but for all sorts of people who very good people, I think, who write there.
Well, I love it. I appreciate your effort and your brain and taking some time to slum it with me on my little YouTube show. Toby Buckles, you're doing good work, sir.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate all those compliments. I'm blushing. Thank you so much for having me on.